Have you ever wondered what happens when you push a good person too far? My husband, Marcus, and his mother, Brenda, found out. They threw me onto the street in the Seattle rain, and they laughed. They thought they took everything, but they forgot one vital detail. You cannot take from someone who has nothing left to lose, except her true identity. One call. That was all it took to turn their dream house into their nightmare. My name is Ilara. I was 35 years old, and on the night my life ended, I was mostly just tired. The drive back from Innovate Solutions had been a crawl of brake lights and misting rain. It was past 7 o'clock when I finally pulled into the driveway of our modern suburban home. The classic Seattle drizzle was thickening, and I remember the wet scent of pine needles and damp asphalt as I stepped out of the car. My mind was already calculating the minutes until I could get out of my constricting blazer, pour a glass of wine, and forget about the quarterly projections. The garage door whirred shut behind me, sealing me inside. The moment I opened the interior door to the kitchen, the warmth I expected wasn't there. The air was static, charged. They were waiting. My husband, Marcus, stood by the quartz island, his arms crossed. His mother, Brenda, was perched on one of the bar stools, her back rigid, and Talia, his younger sister, leaned against the refrigerator, a smirk already playing on her lips. It was an ambush. Then I saw them, lined up by the front door, looking completely alien on the hardwood floor, were my 2 suitcases. "What's going on?" My voice was small. The fatigue evaporated, replaced by a metallic taste of dread. "Marcus, are you going somewhere?" He wouldn't look at me. He just slid a thick manila folder across the countertop. It stopped inches from my hand. "It's over, Ilara," he said, his voice flat, dead. My fingers trembled as I opened it. The top page was a petition for dissolution of marriage, divorce. Beneath it were other documents, bank statements, loan agreements, a notice of foreclosure. "I don't understand," I whispered, shaking my head. The pages blurred. "This mortgage, this second loan, this is a huge amount of money." I saw my signature on the dotted line, a sloppy, imprecise forgery. "I never signed this." "He needed it for his business," Brenda spat, her voice slicing through the sterile air. "His startup, the one you were too selfish to support." I supported us. My job paid for this house." I looked at Marcus, desperate for him to deny it, to say this was all a monstrous mistake. "And now your job will pay for my new life," he sneered. "I need to sell the house. The loan's due. You need to sign the real papers." "No." The word came out stronger than I expected. "I'm not signing anything." "This is fraud. Marcus, this is our home." Brenda laughed. It was a dry, rattling sound. She slid off the stool and walked toward me, her eyes glittering with a triumphant hatred I had spent 7 years pretending not to see. "Who do you think you are?" she hissed, stopping so close I could smell her cloying perfume. "You think you're better than us with your tech job and your fancy suits. You're nothing, a useless, barren wife who couldn't even give my son a child." The words hit Marcus like a stimulant. His face flushed. "Just sign it, Ilara," he roared. "No." I clutched the papers to my chest. He lunged. He didn't hit me. He did something worse. He grabbed the designer handbag I'd set on the counter and ripped it open, scattering my wallet, keys, and lipstick. He snatched my personal phone before I could react. "Marcus, stop." He didn't stop. He drew his arm back and hurled my phone against the slate tile wall. It shattered, the screen exploding in a spiderweb of glass. Then he grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my bicep like claws. He started dragging me, my heels scraping uselessly against the floor. "Marcus, you're hurting me. Stop." He yanked the front door open. The night air blasted in, a wall of wind and stinging, ice-cold rain. He didn't just let go. He shoved me. I stumbled over the threshold, my ankle twisting in my pump. I fell, hard, landing on my hands and knees on the slick, cold concrete of the porch. The impact stole my breath. The rain was torrential now, a biblical downpour that soaked my hair and my silk blouse in seconds. "Get out!" he screamed, his voice raw. "Get out and never come back." I looked up, gasping, rain streaming into my eyes. Through the open door, I saw Brenda's face in the warm light of the foyer. She was smiling, a wide, placid, satisfied smile. Beside her, Talia had her phone raised, the screen bright. She was filming me, and I could hear her high-pitched, cruel giggle even over the sound of the storm. The door slammed shut. The sound was a physical blow. I heard the sharp, final click of the deadbolt sliding into place. I was alone, 35 years old, in my ruined work suit, kneeling on the porch of the house I paid for. I was soaked to the skin, no money, no wallet, and my phone was in pieces on the other side of that locked door. The cold was already seeping into my bones. I stayed on my knees for a long time. Maybe it was only a minute. The cold was so profound it was numbing, a complete shock to the system. The rain felt like tiny needles, and the smell of wet garbage from the bin down the street hit me, a new layer of humiliation. I heard a burst of laughter from inside the house, high-pitched. Talia. A different kind of cold began to form, this one deep inside my chest. It was a dense, heavy thing, an iceberg of pure rage. The shame didn't disappear, but it was overshadowed by this new, clarifying fury. They thought they had broken me. They thought I was what had Brenda called me, a useless, barren wife. I pushed myself up, my palms raw and scraping against the concrete. I was shaking, not just from the cold, but from the adrenaline. My blazer was soaked, plastered to my skin. I reached into the pocket, a reflex, to wipe my face, and my fingers brushed against something hard and flat. My work phone. Marcus had smashed my personal phone. He knew all about that one, but he had forgotten, or perhaps never even known, about the second one. The one Innovate Solutions issued to me. The one I kept in my blazer pocket. Silent. For emergencies. This qualified as an emergency. I huddled against the side of the house, trying to shield the small screen from the worst of the downpour. My fingers were stiff, clumsy. I scrolled to the contacts, past my work colleagues, past my vendors, to a single entry I had put there 7 years ago and prayed I would never have to use. A name I had promised myself I would never dial. The line rang once, not even a full ring. Thorn. The voice was exactly as I remembered it. Calm, professional, unhurried, like a surgeon or a mortician. My voice was a ragged whisper. The words caught in my throat. "It's Ilara," I managed to say. "It's Ilara. I'm at—" I recited the address of the house that was no longer mine. There was no pause, no surprise, no Ilara who. He knew. "Stay put," he said. His voice clipped. 15 minutes. The line went dead. I slid down the wall, sinking onto the wet ground, tucking myself behind a large, manicured shrub. I just had to wait. 15 minutes. I watched the front door. The lights inside were bright. The curtains in the living room were open. I could see their shadows moving, jubilant. I saw the silhouette of a bottle being raised. They were celebrating. The rain turned to a fine, freezing mist. My teeth were chattering so hard I thought they would break. I counted the seconds. I watched the light on the porch, a single weak yellow bulb, shining down on the spot where I had fallen. Then, exactly as he had promised, I heard it. Not a siren. Something quieter, more menacing. The sound of heavy, expensive engines idling. I looked up. They must have heard it inside, too, because the shadows stopped moving. 3 of them. 3 black, gleaming SUVs, the kind that government agencies use. They had no license plates, just polished black grills. They pulled up in perfect, silent formation, one behind the other, their headlights cutting brilliant white cones through the rain, illuminating the front of the house in a harsh, theatrical glare. They stopped precisely at the curb, perfectly parallel, as if placed by a giant. The front door of the house opened a crack. I saw Marcus's eye, wide with confusion. The passenger door of the lead SUV opened. A man stepped out. He was tall, dressed in a bespoke dark suit that seemed to repel the rain. He was flanked, immediately, by two other men, larger, who emerged from the second vehicle. Mr. Thorne. He didn't look at the house. He didn't look at the cracked door or the face in the window. His eyes scanned the yard, the porch, and then they found me, a pathetic, shivering heap behind the shrub. He walked directly toward me, his expensive leather shoes sinking into the mud of the flower bed. He didn't run. He just arrived. The two guards fanned out, one facing the house, the other facing the street. I tried to stand, but my legs wouldn't cooperate. Thorne reached me and did not offer a hand. Instead, he simply unbuttoned his own heavy, dark overcoat. I saw the cashmere lining. He slipped it from his shoulders and draped it over mine. It was impossibly heavy, impossibly warm. It smelled faintly of cedar and wool. He then moved to the lead SUV and opened the rear door, holding it for me. The interior was dark, plush, and warm. "Your brother is waiting, Miss Croft," he said. His voice was not loud, but it carried. It sliced through the sound of the rain and hit the front porch like a bullet. From the crack in the door, I heard a sharp intake of breath. The door opened wider. Marcus and Brenda stood there, their faces pale, illuminated by their own porch light. Their celebratory smiles were gone, replaced by identical masks of slack-jawed, utter disbelief. They had heard him. He had made sure they heard him. Miss Croft. My real name. The name I hadn't used in 7 years. The name they never, ever knew. The door clicked shut, and the SUV moved. There was no sound from the engine, just the whisper of tires on wet pavement. I stared straight ahead, wrapped in the heavy cocoon of Thorne's coat. I did not look back at the house, at the two pale faces frozen in the doorway. The warmth from the coat felt less like comfort and more like armor. We didn't drive long. The vehicle moved through the suburban streets, then onto a highway, before exiting onto a dark, unmarked service road. It led to a private marina, hidden from the main sound. The rain had softened, but the air was still cold. The convoy stopped at the end of a pier. A yacht was waiting. It wasn't a garish party boat. It was small, sleek, and painted matte gray, looking more like a military prototype than a pleasure craft. It was all sharp angles and dark, tinted glass. Thorne opened my door and I followed him aboard. The moment we were on deck, the engines engaged, and we slid away from the dock into the black water. The crossing was fast. We were heading for Bainbridge Island, not the quaint touristy part, but a stretch of coastline I knew was owned by a single entity. The yacht docked at another private pier, this one leading up to a fortress of glass and steel. The house, if you could call it that, was a massive, multi-leveled structure built into the cliffside, almost invisible against the dark trees. It was a monument to isolation. Thorne led me inside. The interior was silent, the air still. This wasn't a home. It was a corporate headquarters. We walked through vast, empty rooms with polished concrete floors and entire walls of glass looking out at the dark, churning sound. He stopped at a set of steel doors and opened one. "He is waiting." I stepped inside. It was an office, dominated by a holographic data display that hovered in the center of the room, and by the man standing in front of it, Julian Croft, my brother. He hadn't changed. He wore a simple black t-shirt and dark pants, the uniform of the reclusive tech god. He founded Aperture Dynamics, a company so powerful it made Innovate Solutions look like a child's lemonade stand. He was thin, intense, and his eyes, when they finally turned to me, were as cold as the water outside. There was no hug, no, "Are you okay?" He just looked at me, at my ruined suit, my matted hair, the expensive coat draped over my shoulders. 7 years, he said. His voice was quiet, but it filled the room. 7 years you've been gone. You gave up the Croft name, all of this, for a failure named Marcus. I didn't flinch. The shivering had stopped. He threw me out, I said. He forged my signature on a second mortgage to fund a fake startup. He's been laundering money for his mother's gambling debts, and he's planning to sell the house, which he can't do unless I sign. I told him everything. The humiliation, the forged papers, the smug smile on Brenda's face, the camera in Talia's hand. I laid it all out, piece by piece, like data points in a report. Julian listened, his face completely impassive. He didn't react to the violence, the betrayal, or the financial crimes. He just processed the information. When I finished, silence stretched between us. He turned back to the holographic display, which was showing complex market data. "You want my help," he stated. It wasn't a question. "I want to destroy them. That's a given." He tapped the air, and the display shifted. "I will help you, but let's be clear. Alara, this isn't family. That ended 7 years ago when you chose him. This is an investment. You need resources. I have them. I will give them to you, on one condition. Name it. You come back, not as my sister, as an asset. Aperture Dynamics needs a vice president of special projects, someone who can handle sensitive, off-book operations. This will be your first. You will take back everything he stole, and then you will come here, and you will work for me." There was no hesitation. The woman who had left this island 7 years ago, seeking a normal life, a simple love, was gone. She had died on that porch. I accept. Julian nodded once. A transaction completed. He pressed a comm on his desk. "Thorne." Mr. Thorne appeared in the doorway instantly. "She's in," Julian said. "You will use every resource. Signal intelligence, financial forensics, physical surveillance. I want to know every dollar Marcus Hayes ever touched. I want to know every person Brenda Hayes has spoken to in the last 5 years. I want the leverage to dismantle their entire pathetic bloodline. I want it on my desk by 6 a.m. tomorrow." "Understood, sir," Thorne replied. He turned to me. "Miss Croft, your rooms are ready." He led me to a minimalist, luxurious suite. A hot shower washed away the last 7 years of weakness. I stood in front of the mirror, wrapped in a thick robe. The woman staring back was not the one who had left for work that morning. Her eyes were hard. The fear was gone. The desperation was gone. Alara, the wife, was dead. Alara Croft, the investor, the VP of Special Projects, had just been reborn. And she was ready to liquidate her assets. I didn't sleep. I don't think I'm capable of sleep anymore. I sat in the dark, watching the sound, until the sky turned a flat, metallic gray. At precisely 6 a.m., a soft chime sounded. Thorne was at my door. He led me back to Julian's office. My brother was already there, drinking black coffee and observing the data stream. A large, flat screen was now active on the wall, displaying a file structure. Thorne stood beside it, holding a tablet. "Good morning, Miss Croft," Thorne said, his voice as neutral as the gray sky. "We have a complete picture. It is, as you suspected, significantly worse." He didn't waste time. He tapped the tablet, and the screen populated with flowcharts and bank ledgers. "Mr. Hayes did not simply take out a second mortgage," Thorne began. "That was merely the seed money. He used that initial fraudulent loan to establish the bona fides for his startup. He then leveraged your name, your reputation at Innovate Solutions, and your credentials as a senior tech strategist to approach 3 separate venture capital firms." My stomach tightened. He didn't just use my signature. He used my identity. "He pitched them a proprietary data compression algorithm," Thorne continued, "which, our technical team confirms, does not exist. He secured just over $9 million in seed funding. $9 million, I whispered. Julian didn't even blink. Twist 1, Thorne said, tapping the screen. A new chart appeared. The startup, Hay Solutions, is a ghost, a shell company registered in Delaware with a forwarding address in Wyoming. The entire $9 million was routed through it in less than 72 hours. Where did it go? I asked, my voice hard. Not where. Who? Thorne's finger swiped, and a new set of wire transfers appeared, ones that went to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands and, ultimately, Macau. Twist 2. The primary beneficiary of these accounts is not Marcus Hayes. It is Brenda Hayes. The room tilted. Brenda, she's a retired receptionist. She is a high-stakes gambler with significant multi-million-dollar debts to several Macau syndicates. Your husband, it appears, has spent the last year committing massive wire fraud not for his own ambition, but to pay for his mother's addiction. She was the architect of the entire conspiracy. I saw her face in my mind, that placid, satisfied smile as I fell into the rain. It wasn't just hatred. It was the smile of a predator who had just secured her next meal. But he had help, Thorne said, moving to the next file. A woman's photograph appeared on the screen. She was sharp, blonde, and smiling, wearing a professional lawyer's attire. Marcus is having an affair, but not with a 20-year-old model. This is Veronica Bishop, a partner at a boutique law firm specializing in bankruptcy and asset seizure. I felt nothing. No jealousy, no betrayal, just clarity. This was an equation, and I was just finding all the variables. Veronica is the one who drafted the fraudulent loan documents. Thorne explained. She's the one who advised him on how to forge your signature. She was, in fact, the one who counseled him to have you physically removed from the property before serving the divorce papers, creating the illusion of abandonment on your part. And Talia, I said, the thought hitting me. The video. Thorne nodded, pulling up a financial record. Talia Hayes has received 3 separate payments of $20,000 from her mother over the last 2 months. Our audio enhancement of the video she took last night captured her saying, "This is going to cost you extra, Mom." She wasn't just filming for pleasure. She was blackmailing her own family for a larger share of the profits. A family of vipers, each one biting the other. Thorne saved the worst for last. This leads us to the final critical point. The VCs are not stupid. They began their due diligence. When their checks on the algorithm came up empty, they started an internal fraud investigation. They are fast-tracking their recovery. They have successfully petitioned the court to seize all known assets. He pointed to a line of red text on the screen. The foreclosure you saw was real. The house, their only tangible asset, is scheduled for public auction in 48 hours. And there it was, the final piece. The room went silent. Julian looked at me, a flicker of something, not sympathy, curiosity. He was waiting to see how the asset he'd just acquired would perform. I finally understood. They didn't just throw me out because they hated me. They threw me out because they were liquidating. They were cashing in their entire life, and I was the one asset they couldn't convert, only discard. They needed me gone, discredited, and silenced before the VCs, the real victims of their fraud, came looking for their money. They needed me to disappear, so I couldn't warn anyone, couldn't stake my own claim. They're not just cruel, I said to Julian, my voice a low, steady hum. They're stupid. They're desperate, Julian corrected. And desperate people are predictable. What's your first move? Vice President. My first move wasn't one of vengeance. It was one of acquisition. Julian didn't send me to a spa to recover. He sent me to the armory. Within an hour, I was seated at the head of a glass conference table in the Bainbridge compound. It was me, 3 of Aperture Dynamics' senior legal counsel, and Julian's chief financial analyst. They weren't there to offer sympathy. They were there to give me an education. For the next 24 hours, I didn't sleep. I consumed. I learned the savage poetry of corporate warfare, financial leverage, hostile acquisition, the precise, brutal definitions of bankruptcy law. They taught me how a single, provable act of fraud, the forgery of my signature, could be used as a fulcrum to pivot an entire case from a simple civil dispute into a catastrophic criminal indictment. I learned how to poison a well, how to salt the earth, how to legally and systematically dismantle a person's entire existence, one asset at a time. The woman who had knelt in the rain was a soft, civilian thing. The woman who emerged from that 24-hour crucible was not. The transformation had to be total. The old me was a liability. I had one of Julian's staff come to my suite. My long hair, the hair Marcus always said made me look so soft, was shorn away. It fell to the floor in heaps. In its place was a short, severe bob, razor-sharp and angled toward my face. My wardrobe, the comfortable sweaters and practical work blouses, was gone. It was replaced by a rack of armor graphite gray power suits, sterile white blouses, and heels sharp enough to leave a mark. I met Julian back in his office, dressed in this new uniform. He didn't compliment me. He didn't have to. His approval was the tablet he slid across the desk. It showed a new account authorization, funded with an amount that made my breath catch. It was a blank check. "The house is just the stage. Elara," he said, his voice quiet. "This isn't about making him pay you back. This is about making him pay. Don't just hurt him, bankrupt him, make him, and his mother, and his sister. Wish they had never been born." My hands were steady. I understand. My first act as vice president of special projects was to create a weapon. I sat with Mr. Thorne. "I need a shell company," I told him, one with no visible ties to me or to Julian. By noon, it existed Bainbridge Holdings, LLC. Mr. Thorne was listed as the sole director. It was clean, sterile, and hungry. My next step was to contact the enemy of my enemy. Marcus had defrauded 3 of the most aggressive venture capital firms on the West Coast. They were furious, embarrassed, and looking for blood. They just didn't know where to aim. I would give them a target. I didn't contact them as Elara Hayes, the victim. I had Thorne arrange the meeting, introducing me as a senior risk analyst for Bainbridge Holdings, a neutral third party with an interest in the case. I sat across from the VC's general counsel, a team of 3 lawyers who looked like they were ready to eat me alive. "You're planning to sue Marcus Hayes for fraud," I said, opening the conversation. "You will fail. He'll claim market volatility. He'll declare bankruptcy. He'll tie you up in litigation for years, and you'll never see a dime." Their lead lawyer narrowed his eyes. "Who the hell are you? I'm the person who is going to give you your victory," I said. I slid a single encrypted flash drive across the table. On that drive is a detailed analysis of the original loan documents Marcus used for his seed capital, and, more importantly, proof that his entire financial foundation, a second mortgage on his primary residence, was secured by forging his wife's signature. Their expressions changed from predatory to intrigued. "He didn't just lie to you about a product," I continued, my voice cold. "He based his entire company on a separate, provable felony. This isn't just a civil case anymore. This is wire fraud, bank fraud, and aggravated identity theft. This is the evidence you need to bypass his lawyers and go straight to the district attorney." "My God," one of them whispered. "Why give us this?" the lead lawyer asked. "What does Bainbridge Holdings want?" "A simple trade," I said. "The foreclosure auction for the house is tomorrow. As the primary creditors, you have the right to bid. We want you to stand down. We want you to let Bainbridge Holdings acquire the property. Uncontested." He scoffed. "You want the primary asset." "No," I corrected him. "The primary asset is the $9 million he stole from you. The house is a rounding error, worth maybe $1 million tops. I am offering you the evidence to get your $9 million back, plus interest, and the satisfaction of seeing him in a federal prison. All I want in return are the table scraps. You get the kill. I get the house." The lawyer looked at his partners. He looked at the flash drive. He looked at me. A slow, cold smile spread across his face. We have a deal. The first alliance was forged. The auction was held in a sterile, beige room in the county courthouse, a place that smelled of old paper and anxiety. I was not in the room. I stood in the hallway outside, Mr. Thorne at my side, watching through the narrow wire glass window in the door. I needed to see their faces. They arrived together, a dysfunctional little tribunal. Marcus looked pale and hungover, tugging at the collar of a suit that was too tight. Brenda was scanning the room with suspicion. And then there was Veronica, the lawyer mistress, carrying a leather briefcase, radiating a smug confidence. She whispered to Marcus, and he managed a weak, conspiring smile. They truly believed they were in control. Their plan, as Thorne had deduced, was for Veronica to use some arcane bankruptcy loophole to challenge the foreclosure, scare off other bidders, and then buy the house back for pennies on the dollar. The auctioneer, a man with a monotone voice, began. He read the address of my old home. We will open the bidding at $300,000. He droned. Veronica immediately raised her numbered paddle. 300,000, she said, her voice sharp and proprietary. I have 300,000, the auctioneer said. Do I hear? 310,000, Thorne said from the back of the room. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the murmuring. Veronica's head snapped around. She looked at Thorne, a well-dressed man she didn't recognize, and dismissed him. A minor annoyance. She raised her paddle. 320, 330, Thorne said, without pause. Veronica's smile tightened. 340, 350, Thorne replied. This was when the first crack appeared in her composure. She hadn't expected a real bidder, let alone one who seemed to be bidding against her personally. She looked at Marcus, who was starting to sweat. Brenda was frowning. 400,000, Veronica declared, trying to jump the bid, to scare him off. 410,000, Thorne said, his voice flat. He wasn't bidding, he was executing a command. 450, she tried again, her voice rising. 460, 500, she shouted. 510,000. Marcus grabbed Veronica's arm. I could see him shaking his head, his lips moving. Stop. The price was already far beyond whatever trick they had planned. This was cash. This was a fight they couldn't win. Veronica was shaking with anger. She was a lawyer being outmaneuvered, and she couldn't stand it. 550, she yelled. 560,000, Thorne said, as calmly as if ordering a coffee. Veronica looked at Marcus. He looked at his mother. Brenda was ashen. They were trapped. They didn't have the money. Their whole plan. The $9 million it was offshore, and this was here, now. 560,000, the auctioneer called, his voice suddenly alive. Going once, going twice. Veronica looked down. Defeated. Sold? The gavel cracked like a gunshot. Sold to Bainbridge Holdings for $560,000. A confused murmur went through the room. Marcus turned to Brenda, his voice a hoarse whisper I could just barely hear. Bainbridge Holdings. Who the hell is Bainbridge Holdings? That was my cue. I pushed the door open. The hinges were silent. I stepped inside. The room went quiet. The three of them turned, and the blood drained from their faces. It wasn't just that I was there. It was how I was there. I was not the woman they had thrown into the rain. That woman was gone. I was wearing a suit of brilliant glacial white, my hair sharp and severe, my stance solid. Beside me, Mr. Thorne had already put his phone away and was holding a portfolio. Brenda made a small, strangled sound. Marcus looked like he had seen a ghost. I walked slowly toward them, my heels clicking on the cheap tile. I didn't stop until I was standing directly in front of them. I looked at Brenda, and I let a slow smile spread across my face. It was her smile, the one she had given me as I knelt on the wet concrete. a smile of pure, unadulterated triumph. Then I turned my back to them and addressed Mr. Thorne. I made sure my voice was clear, crisp, and loud enough for the entire room to hear. Mr. Thorne, please send the official notice to the occupants. I want those tenants out of my property. I looked over my shoulder, just once, at Marcus. Give them 24 hours. Marcus and Brenda stumbled back to the house, their faces a mask of white, pasty fear. Veronica was gone, having peeled away from the courthouse in her luxury sedan, no longer interested in a client who had just been so publicly neutered. They found the notice already waiting, a bright orange sticker slapped onto the front door by a process server. It was official, legally binding. They had 24 hours to vacate. I imagine they spent that night in a frantic, escalating panic. Who did they call? What lawyers did they try to retain? Only to be told that an eviction notice from a new, legal owner after a foreclosure auction was ironclad. They must have screamed at each other, the blame flying like shrapnel. They must have packed, or perhaps they sat in stunned silence, still believing, in their arrogance, that some mistake had been made. I didn't go. When the 24 hours expired, I was not there. Instead, a flatbed truck and 2 large white vans with the Thorne Security Solutions logo, a discreet, new company I'd founded, pulled up to the curb. A team of 12 men in clean black uniforms emerged. They were not a eviction crew. They were a construction crew. Marcus must have come to the door, blustering, threatening to call the police. The crew foreman, a man whose neck was thicker than Marcus's thigh, simply handed him a set of permits. Everything was legal. Everything was my right as the new property owner. They didn't go inside. They began to build. They started with the posts, using pneumatic drivers that pounded steel into the earth with a rhythmic, percussive thud. They were erecting a fence, not a quaint picket fence, but a 10-foot-high chain-link security perimeter. It went up around the entire property line, enclosing the front yard, the backyard, everything. It was finished in 4 hours. Marcus, Brenda, and Talia were now, officially, inside a cage. A single sliding gate was installed at the end of the driveway, manned by 2 of Thorne's uniformed guards. When Talia tried to leave in her car, she was stopped. A guard with a clipboard approached her window. "Name and time of departure, miss," he said, his voice bored. "This is ridiculous. This is my house. This is private property, miss. You are free to leave, but we are required to log all exits." She sped off, enraged. When she returned an hour later, the same thing. "Name and time of arrival. Please open the trunk. What you can't do, that why? We reserve the right to inspect all vehicles entering the property. Miss, ma'am." They were trapped. They could leave. Yes, but they would be logged, checked, and cataloged. They were mice in a maze I had just built. That afternoon, from my office on Bainbridge, I made 2 calls. The first was to the City Utilities Department. The second was to the gas company. As the new, registered owner of the property, I was simply terminating the old accounts and declining to start a new one. At 5:03 p.m., the lights in the house went out. At 5:04, their cell phones lost the Wi-Fi signal. At 5:07, the heat cut off, and the gas stove in the kitchen became a useless piece of metal. The house was plunged into cold, dark silence until 6 p.m. At 6, the external speaker system which the security team had discreetly installed on the fence posts activated. It wasn't music. It was a single, high-pitched, cackling laugh, that cruel, mocking giggle echoing across the manicured lawn, over and over. A short silence, and then again, he. I watched on my new network. Thorne's team had installed micro cameras at the same time as the fence, citing security protocols. I had a clear view of the living room where the 3 of them were huddled in the blue light of their dying phones. Brenda was the first to break. She covered her ears, her body rocking. "Make her stop, Marcus. Make her stop." "It's not me," Talia screamed back, her voice already raw. "It's her. It's that bitch Alara! This is your fault, Marcus roared, shoving his sister. Your video, you're laughing. They were a pit of vipers, and I had just turned the lights out. Brenda started to weep, a high, thin wail that couldn't compete with the sound of her daughter's laughter from the speakers outside. I sat in my office, a cup of hot tea in my hand, the compound silent around me. On the wall, a grid of high-definition screens showed me every angle of my new property. I watched them in the cold, in the dark, as the sound of their own mockery played on repeat. I watched them tear each other apart. The psychological siege had begun. The psychological siege was just the opening act. The real war was one of finance. While they shivered in the dark, Julian and I began the systematic dismantling of their lives. The first strike was public and devastating. The venture capital firms, armed with my evidence, didn't just file a civil suit. They went straight to the U.S. Attorney's Office. A criminal indictment for $9 million in wire fraud, bank fraud, and identity theft was unsealed. The moment the gavel came down on the preliminary hearing, a federal judge signed an order to freeze every known asset belonging to Marcus Hayes. I watched on a monitor as Marcus, having been lured out of the house by a fake legal notice, was informed by a bank manager that his accounts were locked. His credit cards were declined. The millions he thought were safely tucked away were now untouchable, ensnared in a legal net so tight he would never escape it. While the VCs attacked from the front, I attacked from the shadows. Mr. Thorne had compiled a complete history of Brenda's offshore gambling, a single encrypted hard drive containing ledgers, wire transfers, and casino markers totaling millions in undeclared income, was anonymously delivered to the Criminal Investigation Division of the IRS. Within 12 hours, a full-scale, high-priority tax audit was triggered. They weren't just interested in the money she had. They were interested in the 10 years of taxes she had never paid on it. Her financial world was about to be vivisected. Then, Julian made his move. It was a flex of such obscene power it almost made me laugh. He didn't just get Veronica fired, he bought her. Her boutique law firm, Bishop and Associates, was a small, ambitious practice. Julian's holding company, Aperture Dynamics, executed a hostile acquisition, absorbing the firm's assets and liabilities in a single afternoon. The deal closed at 4 p.m. At 4:01, Julian, as the new owner, held an emergency board meeting via teleconference. His only motion was to terminate the employment of partner Veronica Bishop, effective immediately, for gross ethical violations that compromised the firm's integrity. She was escorted from her own office by security. Her career not just ended, but annihilated. And then there was Talia. Her digital trophy, the video she had used for blackmail, became her downfall. An anonymous, concerned student sent the video clip to the dean of students at her university, along with a tip about the blackmail payments. It was framed as an issue of cyberbullying and severe harassment. The university, terrified of a public scandal, immediately suspended her, pending a full expulsion hearing. They were now completely, utterly, and perfectly isolated. Marcus, in a last, desperate act, left the house now a cold, dark prison and tried to use a payphone. He tried to call his old contacts, the few business partners who might still take his call. He found that his name was poison. My brother had been surgical. A single, quiet memo had been disseminated through the tech and finance industries. Aperture Dynamics considers Marcus Hayes a hostile actor. Any entity found collaborating with him will be subject to a full partnership review. It was a corporate death sentence. They had no home, the house was mine, and I was letting them rot in it. They had no money, their accounts were frozen. They had no friends, their legal counsel was disbarred, and their social circle had evaporated. They had no future. We had cut every wire, burned every bridge, and barricaded every exit. It was during the final sweep of Veronica's seized assets that Thorne's team found the final delicious piece of treachery. "There's a discrepancy. Miss Croft," Thorne reported, his voice betraying a rare hint of professional admiration for the sheer level of deceit. A discrepancy. "It appears Miss Bishop was not merely an accomplice," he said, bringing a new set of accounts onto the main screen. "She was also a parasite. While she was helping Marcus and Brenda launder the $9 million, she was simultaneously siphoning nearly $2 million of it for herself, routing it through a separate, encrypted wallet. She wasn't just his mistress. She was robbing him blind. I almost felt a moment of pity. He had destroyed his life for a woman who was, in the end, an even better predator than he was. Almost. He'd been in that cold, dark house for 3 days. The laughter from the speakers had stopped, replaced by a tomb-like silence. I knew his mind would be in shreds. The text message came from an unknown, prepaid number, a digital scream from a cornered rat. "Meet me, alone. Or I swear to God I'll tell the cops you were in on it. I'll tell them you were a co-conspirator." A co-conspirator. The sheer, pathetic stupidity of it. He was threatening me with a lie that the VCs, the IRS, and the U.S. Attorney's Office had already disproven. It was a bluff from a man with no cards left. But I knew this was the last move. This was the checkmate I had been waiting for. "I'll be there," I texted back. "But I picked the place." I chose the lobby of the Olympic Hotel, downtown Seattle, at 5 p.m. It would be crowded, bright, and filled with witnesses. I had no intention of meeting him alone. Mr. Thorne and his men were already seated, spread out at different tables, sipping coffee and reading newspapers, just more faces in the 5-star crowd. I arrived first. I took a seat in a velvet armchair in the center of the grand lobby, a pot of tea placed in front of me. I was a study in calm. He arrived late, looking like he'd been pulled from a wreckage. He looked 20 years older. His suit was crumpled, the one he had worn to the auction. His face was gray with stubble, his eyes bloodshot and darting. He smelled of sweat and fear. He wasn't the man who had thrown me out. He was a ghost. He practically fell into the chair opposite me. He tried to compose himself, to muster some of his old arrogance, but it was gone. "Ilara," he began, his voice a hoarse croak. He leaned forward, trying to be sincere. "Ilara, I was wrong. I messed up. You know my mother. You know what she's like. She forced me. She manipulated me." He reached out, his hand trembling, to put it on mine. I moved my hand to my teacup before he could touch me. "None of this was me," he pleaded. "We can fix this, you and me. We can start over. Go somewhere. Just tell your people to stop." I looked at him, at this hollowed-out shell. I took a slow sip of my tea. Then I smiled. "You have 5 minutes. Marcus." The change was instant. The pathetic, whimpering act evaporated, replaced by the ugly, desperate thing underneath. His eyes narrowed. "You think you're so smart," he hissed, leaning in close. "You think you've won. You have to help me. You have to call them off. Or I'll do it. I'll release the recording." I raised an eyebrow. "What recording?" "Don't play dumb with me," he whispered, his voice cracking. "The one from 6 months ago. The one where I told you about the VC loans and you said, 'Just be careful.' You knew. Ilara, you knew, and you admitted it. I'll take it to the DA. You'll be an accomplice. It's my last play, and I'll use it." I stared at him. He was actually trying to blackmail me. He really was this stupid. I nodded slowly, as if considering it. "That recording," I said, my voice thoughtful. "The one where I admitted I knew you mean this one." I set my teacup down. I reached into my purse and pulled out my new phone. Not the company phone, but my personal one. Marcus's eyes widened. "How did you—" "You're a creature of habit, Marcus," I said, "and one of predictable terror. When you got the first email from Bainbridge Holdings Legal, the one marked Urgent Asset Seizure Warning, you clicked the attachment, didn't you? You were desperate for information. You've been carrying a transmitter in your pocket for the last 48 hours. I tapped the screen. I didn't play a recording of me. I played a recording of him. The sound that filled the air between us was his own voice, tinny and sharp, but unmistakable, and Veronica's. It was from 2 days before he threw me out. His voice spoke first. She'll never sign it. She's not stupid. Then, I heard Veronica's voice reply. Then we have to get her out. We'll claim she abandoned you. But what if it goes south? What if she goes to the cops about the forgery? Marcus spoke again. Then we plant the seed. We'll say she was in on it. We'll say she was the co-conspirator. We just need to get her on tape saying something, anything, about the loans. We can edit it later. We'll trap her. If I'm going down, she's going down with me. I hit stop. The silence in the opulent lobby was deafening, broken only by the clink of distant glasses. Marcus was as white as a sheet. He was staring at the phone, then at me. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He wasn't just beaten. He wasn't just exposed. He finally understood. He had been trying to set a trap for me while I was already sitting in the control room, watching him build it. He had never been the predator. He had always, from the moment I made that call, been the prey. His reaction was pure, desperate instinct. The moment the audio recording of his own treachery finished playing, he lunged. He didn't try to run. He didn't try to argue. He lunged across the table, his hand clawed, not at me, but at the phone in my hand, a primal scream tearing from his throat. He never touched it. Before his fingers even cleared the teacups, the 2 men at the table next to us were on their feet. They weren't Thorne's private security. They were plainclothes officers, coordinated, waiting. One man intercepted Marcus's arm, using his own momentum to twist it behind his back, slamming him face down onto the table. The other officer produced a pair of handcuffs. I didn't move. I calmly picked up my phone, checked the screen, and slid it back into my purse. He just threatened me, I said, my voice rising just enough to be clear in the sudden silence of the lobby. He attempted to assault me to steal my property. And I believe, officers, that this is the man you've been looking for, Marcus Hayes. He's wanted for $9 million in wire fraud. The name was the final key. Marcus Hayes, the lead officer said, yanking him upright by the handcuffs. You are under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, and let's add assault to that, shall we? He was weeping now. A pathetic, broken sound. He was babbling about his mother, about Veronica, about me, how I set him up. He was just another piece of trash, being hauled out of a 5-star hotel as the guests looked on, and I had timed it perfectly. As the first handcuff clicked shut on Marcus's wrist in the hotel lobby, a separate team was moving on the house. My house. The tactical team from the IRS Criminal Investigation Division, wearing federal vests, used a battering ram to open the security gate I had installed. They stormed the front door of the cold, dark prison I had built. They found Brenda inside, wrapped in a mink coat, sitting on a sofa, rocking back and forth in the dark. She was arrested on multiple counts of federal tax evasion and conspiracy to commit money laundering. She didn't get a polite escort. She was cuffed and dragged from the property she had tried to steal. At that very same hour, the final piece fell into place. Talia. Expelled from university, cut off from her family's frozen accounts. She had been shoplifting to survive. She was caught by store security trying to walk out of a high-end boutique with a $500 bracelet. A petty, predictable end. One loose end remained. Veronica. She was the smartest of them. The moment the news of Marcus's indictment hit the wire, she knew the game was over. She didn't go home. She went straight to SeaTac Airport, carrying a single heavy go bag, heading for a flight to a non-extradition country. She didn't make it. Mr. Thorne was waiting for her at the gate. He didn't stop her. He didn't call security. He simply stepped in front of her, polite and immovable. Miss Bishop. Get out of my way, she hissed, her eyes darting around. A moment. He held up a tablet. He didn't ask her to watch, he just pressed play. Veronica's face went from pale to gray. She was watching a screen recording, captured by our team, of her meticulously siphoning the $2 million from Marcus's stolen funds into her own anonymous offshore crypto wallet. Undeniable proof she was robbing her own partners. Thorne lowered the tablet. "Miss Croft has asked me to present you with 2 options," he said, his voice quiet. "Option 1, you immediately transfer the full amount you stole to the Alara Croft Fund for victims of fraud. We have provided the account details. In return, you get to board your flight and never come back." "And option 2, she whispered. "Option 2, Thorne said. "I press this button, and this video file, along with a full complaint, is sent directly to the Washington State Bar Association's disciplinary committee. Your career will be over before your flight leaves the ground." From my office on Bainbridge Island, I watched the lights of Seattle glitter across the black water. The city was beautiful from a distance. The door opened behind me, and Mr. Thorne stepped in. "It is done, Miss Croft," he said. "Marcus and Brenda are in federal custody. Talia is in county processing, and the fund just received a very substantial anonymous donation." I nodded, once, taking a sip of my tea. I didn't turn from the window. The revenge was over. The accounts were balanced. Justice, in its own cold, financial way, had finally been served. Thank you all for listening to my story. I'd love to connect. So please comment below and let me know where in the world you're listening from and share your thoughts. Make sure you subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories, like this video, and show your support by hitting that hype button so this story gets heard by even more people.